What's up, fellas? In today's video, we're going to be talking about my favorite trades in NBA history. You guys know that I love trades. I love player movement. I love free agency. And these are a couple of mostly recent trades that, for a couple of different reasons, I really, really love not only the trade themselves, but how it worked out. It could be for both teams. It could just be for one team. But these are some of my favorite trades in recent NBA history here in this list. But quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every single day on this channel. It's a great place for consistent NBA content. So if that's something you're looking for, then consider subbing to the channel. If you like the content, you can leave a like rating on the video as well. It doesn't take very long. It helps me out a ton. It helps get the videos out to more people on YouTube. And you can check me out at various socials in a link tree down in the description below. With all those things said, let's go and get to the first entry on this list. And it is one that was surprising at the time. I think initially most people thought it was pretty one-sided, and has now turned out to be a really, really interesting trade here. And it is Domantas Sabonis and Victor Oladipo going to Indiana in exchange for Paul George. Because this is one of those where, you know, this has become increasingly common now, but at the time it was a little bit uncommon for a player to make it so known to a team that they did not want to be there anymore. And Paul George let Indiana know that he was leaving, you know, and it let them know well in advance that he had no plans to re-sign with the team. And we've seen that more commonly recently with Anthony Davis and James Harden. But George was one of the earliest ones of that in this modern era. And people were surprised that all that Indiana could get in exchange was Oladipo, who was not coming off a great season by any means in Oklahoma City. And same thing with Sabonis, who had just come off a rookie season in which he was basically like a glorified three-point specialist. And people were like, well, what? Paul George is, you know, an all NBA caliber player. How is this all that they're getting? How are there no picks? How are there no like super high, you know, high ceiling young players? And as it turned out, Victor Oladipo became an all NBA caliber guy, and Domantas Sabonis is one of the best bigs in the East now. And, you know, Oladipo has now moved on to Houston, and they've gotten, you know, Karis LeVert for him, and some of his value certainly decreased as a result of a significant lower leg injury. But it is still, you know, a pretty incredible trade to look back on when you think about the immediate negative reaction to the trade and how positively it ended up working out for Indiana, considering that George was leaving anyway. To get that kind of value back for Paul George is incredible. And Domantas Sabonis, of course, is a pretty, you know, central focal point to their roster now moving forward, and especially considering George was gone anyway, and then everything that happened in Oklahoma City with Paul George as well. This group of trades where it's like George to Oklahoma City to LA, and then Sabonis from Orlando to Oklahoma City to Indiana to Houston, and Sabonis from Oklahoma City, and then Ibaka to Orlando, and then Ibaka, you know, just all of that stuff is just so crazy to think about, all these different guys getting moved to all these different teams and how it has impacted the league. But one of my favorites is this trade, particularly that sent Paul George to Oklahoma City. Second up now on the list, speaking of crazy trades, is the Kawhi Leonard trade. And it's still just weird to look back with the context that we now have of what superstar trades look like, you know, and James Harden getting, you know, 8 first-round picks in exchange for James Harden, all the picks in exchange for Anthony Davis, all the picks in exchange for Drew Holiday, of all people. And Kawhi Leonard back in, you know, what was it, 2019, 2018, and Danny Green, by the way, who was not a throw-in in this trade and was absolutely a significant piece of Toronto's title run, to Toronto in exchange for DeMar DeRozan, who's obviously an all-star level player, good player, Jakob Poeltl, who's a fine big, and 1 first-round pick. Now, you know, you can argue about, you know, the comparison between, well, DeRozan is a really good, healthy player, and, you know, Oladipo, if you're comparing it to the Harden trade, Oladipo was, you know, has been hurt and, you know, is a little bit rusty. So it's not like, you know, the Raptors should have been giving up 8 first-round picks here in exchange for Kawhi Leonard. And then you, of course, have to consider the context of Leonard being hurt and people not knowing how well he's going to play, and that certainly decreases value and him just forcing his way out of San Antonio. But it's still just crazy, knowing everything we know about Kawhi now, that this is all it took for Toronto to get him. And one of my favorite parts about this deal is that it is one of the very, very few in NBA history that led directly to an NBA title. Like the year when this trade was made, it led to an NBA title for Toronto, and it is still one of the craziest trades to look back on. And ultimately, I mean, it's a good thing Toronto didn't give up all these first-round picks and stuff, because of course Kawhi did leave a year later, but the fact that he forced his way out of San Antonio really didn't get a ton of value for him. The fact that he showed up in Toronto was really, really good, leads them to a title, then leaves anyway, and Toronto is still fine, they're still decent. Just blows my mind. This is going to be one where, with NBA YouTube as a thing in 2050, someone's going to get like 1 million views on a video about this Kawhi Leonard trade, because it's absolutely insane. Next up now, third on the list, is one that just was another like kind of out of nowhere surprise one. When I think of like crazy out of nowhere surprise trades, I think of 3 in the recent NBA. Kawhi to Toronto, not because of Kawhi being traded, but because of where he ended up and what he got traded for. Porzingis to the Mavs, which is this selection, and then DeMarcus Cousins to the Pelicans, who will not get to on this list, but I just kind of grouped those three together. And Porzingis to the Mavs was just a complete out of nowhere one, because it went from Porzingis is fine, he's a focal point of the Knicks, to a couple hours later, he's gone, and he's a Dallas Maverick, in exchange for expiring contracts, Dennis Smith Jr., and 2 first-round picks, one in 2021, one in 2023. And what I appreciated about this move for the Mavs was they recognized immediately how good Luka was, and they're like, you know what, we got to go get somebody for this guy. We have to right now go ahead and add somebody to this group that is going to be a really significant piece, long term with Luka, ideally. And I just really appreciate, respect the aggressiveness of this move. Now, ultimately, is it going to work out? Is Porzingis going to be a great fit? I don't know. We don't obviously know the health of all that either. And we don't know what the Knicks are going to get out of these first round picks. This trade is still a very much like incomplete grade, but it's still really cool to look back at. And I appreciate the aggressiveness of it. Next up now is one that we don't talk about a ton because Jimmy Butler got traded so many different times, but this is my favorite Jimmy Butler trade, okay? Jimmy Butler to Minnesota in exchange, along with Justin Patton, in exchange for Lauri Markkanen, Chris Dunn, and Zach LaVine. And on paper, that's a pretty significant haul for Chicago. I mean, Lauri Markkanen, it was a draft night trade, so it was the pick that became Lauri Markkanen. He's had a couple of good seasons, has been a little bit up and down, but I think he's a good player. Chris Dunn's irrelevant. But Zach LaVine has turned into an all-star, borderline all-NBA caliber guy, one of the really, really good scorers in the East. And, Minnesota got some stuff out of Jimmy Butler, right? And, he is one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, that they have any kind of recent success there in Minnesota. Is that year that they made the playoffs with Jimmy Butler was the only time that they have made the playoffs without Kevin Garnett on their roster in franchise history. So obviously significant there. And you can look at, other times that Jimmy Butler has been traded, but this one for me is crazy to look back and think how much Chicago really got here. I mean, LaVine, Markkanen, and like I said, Dunn's kind of irrelevant. It's crazy how much value is there considering what LaVine has turned into, albeit he was coming off an injury at the time. And the relatively limited value that Butler provided, because eventually he just got basically flipped for like Robert Covington and Dario Saric. So crazy to look back on and think about this one with all the different times that Butler has been traded. This is a significant haul, and on draft night as well, which makes it a little bit more fun as well for Butler going from Chicago to Minnesota. And then the last up now is one that's not so recent, but it's still one of my favorites. And it's Rasheed Wallace to the Detroit Pistons. And here's why. There's a lot of different stuff going on here with Rasheed. So first, he gets moved to Atlanta. He gets moved to the Hawks from Portland in the middle of the year and spends 10 days as an Atlanta Hawk, and then gets moved to Detroit. And the players and stuff and the picks exactly are not super relevant to the modern NBA. The most relevant thing that happens here is that one of the picks, or a pick that Atlanta got in exchange for Rasheed, ended up becoming Josh Smith down the road, who of course became a good player for them. But it's just so crazy to think about the fact that Rasheed Wallace went from Portland to Atlanta. 10 days later, he goes to Detroit. And again, it's one of those that led directly to a title, which makes it one of the more significant trades in NBA history. Rasheed goes to Detroit. It's a perfect fit. It's one of the most outlier, NBA champions in league history. And it almost didn't happen because he ended up in Atlanta. It's so crazy to think about. And that's one of my favorite facts about that Pistons team and just the group that they put together is the fact that they traded for Rasheed 10 days after he showed up in Atlanta, which is just a crazy thing to think about. But those are my favorite trades in recent NBA history. If you want to go further and further back, and if you really want me to be a homer about certain trades, that's fine. But these are my favorite trades in kind of semi-recent NBA history. We've got Domantas Sabonis and Victor Oladipo for Paul George, Kawhi to Toronto, Porzingis to the Mavs, Butler to Minnesota, Rasheed Wallace to Detroit. Let me know down in the comment section below what some of your favorite trades in NBA history are. With all those things said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, you can check out the boxes on screen. You can also sub the channel, like the video, check out the various socials at the bottom of the screen. With all those things said, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.